Could you go with me to John chapter 1 this morning? John, the first chapter. And I want to begin by just commenting. Much in today's presentation will come from Brother Cloud. Again, we have a few of those books available in the book rack back there if you're interested, or you can get it free online. Our verse this morning is taken from John chapter 1. Verse 1 says, "In the beginning was the Word," speaking of Jesus, "and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The same was in the beginning with God." And then verse 3 says, "All things were made by Him, and without Him was not anything made that was made." All things made by Him. Today we are looking at natural selection. We have already seen what Darwin has taught and one of the first problems with it, but let me just review quickly. According to Charles Darwin, natural selection is the main mechanism of evolution. It refers to the survival of the fittest, and he believed that there are too many creatures for the environment. So they're always struggling to survive. Because of this struggle, only the best adapted creatures survive. And you know how it goes. He says it might be birds with larger beaks, or moths with better camouflage coloring, or giraffes with longer necks, but only the best adapted will survive. And over millions of years, this process supposedly results in the evolution of creatures. So we said last time, the first problem with that, of four that we're looking at, number one, natural selection can only explain minor variations. I won't repeat that, what we studied there today, but we will move on to the second one there. Natural selection cannot build because it cannot change the DNA. Natural selection cannot produce new creatures because it has no creative power to add information to the creature's DNA. Now, DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. All right, I worked on that for a long time and I still didn't get it perfect, but that is the molecule that acts as a blueprint for all living things. You've got lots of DNA in you, and of course now they're using it for forensic purposes. But the DNA is obtained from the mother and father, and it's passed on from generation to generation. It contains all of the information that builds our bodies. When Charles Darwin wrote his book on the origin of species, he did not know anything about the amazing DNA because it wasn't yet discovered. In fact, much of our knowledge about DNA has come about in the last 70 years. In 1953, the inventors, I guess discoverers is the better word, were putting out their first papers on it. And then in 1962, they were awarded a Nobel Prize for their discovery of the shape and structure of DNA. This is a reconstruction of their model of DNA. It's at the Science Museum in London. DNA is so small that it takes a very expensive electron microscope to see it. I believe they're $1 million machines, and we have 3 of them, last I heard, at the University of Wollongong on the Innovation Campus. But they are capable of 2 million power magnification. So you understand, the most simple would be to just double it. What if you could do that all the way to a 2 million power? Well, here's what would happen. Here's a strand of tiny DNA under an electron microscope. An ant under an electron microscope. That little thing that you step on and it just keeps right on walking because it fit in between the treads of your shoe. That thing's massive under there. Here's a flea. And here's a guitar string. So it gets down to a lot of detail. Each living cell has a copy of the DNA. So if you notice there, starting up at the top left, you've got the cell out of which you could pull, if you could pull the nucleus, then from there you would find the chromosome, and the chromosome is made up of all this DNA. And here are cells under a powerful microscope. Now, how many cells do you think you have this morning? Well, the number is between 10 and 100 trillion cells. I suppose if you're taller, you probably have closer to the 100 trillion and so forth. But that is such a large number. It's 10 or 100 followed by 12 zeros. The body forms 300 billion new cells every day. In the few minutes we have been here, your body has manufactured millions of cells, 200 million a minute, 203 I counted. For example, your skin is continually being replaced with these plump new cells. Each cell has the right shape and structure for its function. For example, when you have a wound, some of you working yesterday out here at the Working Bee, you might have scratched yourself. Well, skin cell formation speeds up to fill in the gap, and then it slows back down to the normal pace. Each cell in your body is more complicated than a modern city. It has a command center, gates, roads, cargo carriers, power generators, power transmission lines, factories, waste disposal, probably far more, but that's what we know of as of a couple of years ago. The DNA in one cell holds information equivalent to at least 1,000 large books in your body, in every cell of your body. Now, if your mind isn't being blown away by this, maybe another cup of coffee will help you wake up to get it. Just try to pick up on what we're saying here. The DNA is like a blueprint that contains the instructions for constructing a building. DNA is also like the instructions for making a doily. Anyone here ever try to make a doily? Not me. Everyone knows a doily doesn't make itself. It has to have both a designer and a maker, and it's usually two different individuals that do it. The seamstress reads the instructions step by step, and then she makes the doily. Well, likewise, DNA has the instructions to make the person. The cell reads the instructions and makes the various parts of your body. The DNA has the information for that type of plant or creature, and only that type. You don't have any DNA in you for making a dandelion. The microscopic DNA is about 1 meter in length, and it's coiled up in an amazing way so that it fits into the nucleus of this tiny little cell. The strands of DNA are coiled together and packed into the chromosome packages in a breathtaking marvel of microengineering. All of this is inside of the living cell. Now, if your mind is not already blown away, watch this. If the DNA in each cell in your body could be combined into one string and stretched out, it would reach to the sun and back at least 4 times. Now, the sun is an amazing over 150 million kilometers away. You think of the size of Australia. If you were to go from Perth to here, it's approximately 5,000 kilometers. How many more times is it from here to the sun? Well, to do that and go back. Go there, come back. Do that 4 times, return trip. That's the DNA in your body. And how many of us are just in this room, The DNA contains the information to build the living creature, whether it's a worm or a rose or a man. Man's DNA contains the instructions to build every organ in the body. You have DNA that tells you here's how to make the stomach, here's how to make the skin, and so forth. Not only does each cell contain the information to build the body, but it also has the machinery to make the body from that information. We'll share with you the name of that motor. Another scientist will a little bit later Lord willing. It does this by building proteins and other things and using those to make up the living body. This DNA information is then passed on from generation to generation, and it never results in a different kind of creature. You're not going to, in some way give birth to a puppy or something like that. It's just not possible. So this fella has discovered these little motors I was telling you about.
Darwin and folks in his day didn't know much about the cell.
Right.
They had crummy microscopes that looked like a little piece of jelly, and they knew nothing about molecules. And we now know that life...
Tiny and elementary also meant simple to them. So,
yes,
so biologically
that's
simple.
correct.
All
So
right.
like Jell-O or a jelly, they thought it might just bubble up from the sea. But modern science, in the past 70 or so years, has shown that the cell is run by molecular machines, real machines made of molecules, and really sophisticated ones. There are machines that act as propellers, machines that act as trucks to bring supplies from one side of the cell to the other side of the cell.
So when you magnify, these days we know enough about cells to know that they're not little blobs of Jell-O.
That's right.
You get inside a cell and you're looking at a city.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, that's right. It's got electrical apparatus, it's got vehicles, it's got information, it's got all sorts of things. And the problem with irreducible complexity is, if you think about it, machines are made of different parts. Say a lawnmower, it's got a blade, it's got a motor, wheels, stuff like that. But Darwin always insisted that his theory had to work by numerous successive slight modifications. It had to be very, very gradual. But if you try to build a machine like a lawnmower or a mousetrap,
I like the mousetrap because that's so simple, even I can get it in my head.
Yeah, just think of a mechanical mousetrap. It's got a number of different pieces. Now, if you wanted to build something like that slowly and have each part or each intermediate work, you've got a big problem, because it needs all of the parts to work. It needs a spring, a wooden base, a couple other metal parts. And just to capture that concept, I invented the phrase irreducible complexity, because it's complex, can't reduce it, or
Take
else...
away one piece and it just doesn't work.
And the mousetrap doesn't work.
Right.
Yeah.
Therefore, it could not, the mousetrap. Take away one piece from one of these fantastically complicated machines in a cell,
Right.
it doesn't function, and therefore could not have conferred an adaptive advantage.
Right, and it could not be built gradually and improving each step of the way.
The intermediate stages confer no functional advantage, therefore there's nothing for natural selection to select on the way from the simple to the complex.
Okay. To build something new, such as growing feathers and wings on a dinosaur, would require new information in the DNA. But natural selection has no power to do this. It was believed in Darwin's day that if a man such as a blacksmith developed strong muscles, he would pass this characteristic to his sons. This thinking was based on Jean Lamarck, and he had a theory that the giraffe got its long neck by stretching to reach higher branches of trees. But this is now known to be untrue. If a man develops big muscles or strong running legs, he does not pass this characteristic to his children, because these are acquired traits. They don't change the DNA. Stretching muscles doesn't change the creature's DNA that it inherited from its mother and father. Even if one giraffe developed a slightly longer neck, this trait would not be passed along to its offspring. Well, that was the view that Jean Lamarck had. Well, this fellow named Friedrich Weissmann disproved Lamarckism with his experiments with mice. How did he do that? Well, he cut off the tails of 901 mice for 19 generations. But the baby mice always had full tails. And so he worked it out that, Lamarckism isn't quite right. Think about Darwin's finches. Because of a drought, the finches with larger beaks survived better. But this process didn't create the beaks, as Darwin suggested. It didn't even create large beaks. The DNA of a finch has information for different size beaks.